Hello, hello, and welcome to Keybard. I am Tembi, and today I am so excited to talk with Dan McCreary. Now, let me tell you a little bit about his background. He is an AI strategist that works as head of AI for TigerGraph. In the past, Dan worked as a VLSI circuit designer at Bell Labs and with the creators of the UNIX operating system. He has worked with Steve Jobs at Next Computer and founded his own consulting firm with over 75 employees. And his background includes topics such as scale out enterprise knowledge graphs, high performance computing, and advanced databases to support AI. While at a healthcare company, he helped create the world's largest knowledge graph. He is the co author of the book Making Sense of No SQL and is a frequent blogger on AI strategy. He has been closely following the growth of knowledge graphs and generative AI. He is a huge fan of ChatGPT, also a fave of mine. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. That was a very nice introduction. So honored to
Yeah.
be on your podcast. I've been reading about you and all of the things you do, so I'm just very grateful to be part of your network here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so happy to have you. So, all right, let's jump in. You have achieved significant accomplishments in the tech space, right? Particularly with artificial intelligence, also known as AI, knowledge graphs, and no SQL. You even co wrote a book on it and co founded the No SQL Now conference. So, okay, what led you to all of this incredible work?
Well, to make a long story short, I'm dyslexic. I grew up thinking I was kind of the dumbest kid in the class. And then I had an uncle who was a fantastic mentor for me. And he kind of walked me through being good at something, which was building electronic circuits, learning how to solder. And ever since then, I realized that I could use my brain in ways that were a little unique. And when I went to Bell Labs, I designed circuits and I found I could debug circuits a little bit better. I could kind of see electrons moving through systems. And throughout my career, I just had this weird gift that I can see data movement. I'm a visual thinker. I have a very strong curiosity about how computers work. And I just kind of used that to help me solve problems. And one of my favorite problems is the problems in the educational and art space. How do we get our teachers to generate these applications just by using ChatGPT? And more importantly, how do we get more of our creative community involved in the technology sector? So that crossover between education and arts has always been fascinating for me.
Wow. I mean, so you say you started with, I guess I would say using your hands, right? Just sort
Mm,
of
yeah.
picking things apart and trying to understand like with the circuit boards and everything. It was that just something that you made a decision at some point and said, okay, this is what I'm gonna do with my career, or did you just keep doing it and you found yourself kind of like, oh, I guess this is my life?
I think there's something in my DNA that wants me to build things. I always tell people that as you get older, you figure out what makes you happy, and you know who you are. And one of the things I know is that I'm happiest when I'm building stuff with kids. I know that sounds a little crazy, but I think there's a technical term for it called social constructionism, right? That's the theory that kids learn the fastest when they're building stuff and working with others.
Hmm.
So, working with kids has always made me incredibly happy. I have three daughters, and I always worked with them. I just love to watch them learn about things and build things in the shop and work with their hands. But what it also drove me to is figure out what are the hardest problems in our society and how can I build the skills to help solve those problems. We have so many challenges in our world today with the environment, with inequality, with income distribution, and I'm trying to use my the gifts that I have to think about systems and how they work to try to put in little pieces that'll have leverage to make the world a better place.
I love that. And so one of those gifts that you have is the gift of using AI for all kinds of interesting educational purposes. So tell us about your first exposure to AI. Would you consider yourself an innovator or an early adopter of certain AI technologies, or were you initially resistant, like, nope, not doing it?
Well, I'm so old that I go back about five generations in AI. I'm part of what we currently call the GoFis, good old fashioned AI, good old fashioned.
Oh,
So GoFis are, the gray-haired people that were trying to do AI in the 80s, right? When computers were, 1 billionth the power they are today, or less. And I was trying to build uh, complex computer system that generated software that would generate chips to lay things out. And one of the things I learned was that every time I wanted to do something cool in AI, I was always limited by the size of the computer, the amount of memory, the algorithms, and the lack of data. And every year we have this thing called Moore's Law, and Moore's Law kind of says that the density of computer chips doubled every 18 months. And so that it kept happening. And right around 2014, if you look in my bookshelf, I have all these old books on AI. We call it classical AI or symbolic AI. All of them kind of became obsolete because these young students working with brilliant professors, Jeffrey Hinton and others, figured out that you could use this gaming engine called a graphics processing unit to build these things called neural networks that could do crazy things like recognize images, what were things in images. And ever since then, they realized that by breaking problems up into lots of small pieces called parallel computation, we take an image, for example, we break it up into literally thousands of small sections. We process that section individually, we bring them together, and we say, we found a cat in this picture and stuff. That whole world just changed dramatically. I was aware of it, I wasn't a big follower of it, but that has really led to this thing called large language models. GPT is those. And even though I don't consider them, quote, intelligent, they are very useful, right? And they're very useful for doing things like allowing a teacher in the middle of a class to describe an animation and then have that animation work so the students can visualize and actually interact and play with those animations. So it's really going to change our world so much in so many different ways. And I'm just excited to be part of a network of people that are trying to do it for everyone and work with a lot of inner city kids, especially girls, minorities. I'm actively part of the Girls Who Code system. And in fact, there's a Black Girls Who Code group also
yeah.
now too. So I'm so supportive of those groups. But the idea is to not just have AI be part of a wealthy suburban district schools. All kids, inner city, rural areas that don't even have access to mentors, they can benefit from these technologies.
You mentioned earlier about the idea of you talked about Moore's law, you talked about obsolescence of prior technology. Is that a new phenomenon that it hasn't always been that sort of technology kind of builds on the next, or is it that there are certain things that just become obsolete? I guess maybe both, right? There's certain things I feel like we still use, and then there's certain things that we don't still use. But is there a theorem or some sort of a name for that?
Yeah, I would say there is. A lot of it has to do with the fact that there are certain things in technology that we have been able to predict in the past. I'm not saying we can predict in the future, but in the past, Moore's law said that in general, computers are going to get twice as powerful every 18 months. And he made that observation way back in 1964, believe it or not.
That
1964.
that is that really blows my mind. I think for me, and I feel like I'm a decently tech savvy person. I feel like I just couldn't have imagined that back then, and it certainly didn't seem like it was in the public discourse, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree that that was more of a conversation being had in circles of people like yourself who understood computing and how that worked?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very well understood in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, it's called, where they could see these trends and they could start to see that certain technologies were going to increase at the how much data you can store in memory. It has been doubling for a long time, how fast we could process that. But that also triggered the fact that if we want to build a machine learning model, we have to have a whole bunch of data to train it on to know what the truth is. And then it can look for the patterns in that data, and that it's that marching together of three things: more data, better algorithms to process the data, and better hardware. As they all got better, we got this weird thing, we call it the nonlinear happenings, where instead of having this, we get better, 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 we get this big jump in productivity, this jump in the ability to do that. And AI and neural networks and large language models was that big jump that really started happening in 2014. I don't know if you remember when GPT-3 came out. Not a lot of people knew about it.
I'd vaguely heard about it, but I didn't understand very much about AI at all. So I was just like, okay, I mean, I guess I'm one of those people where I'm like, all right, let's see what happens. I'll just wait until it kind of trickles down to me.
Yeah, yeah. And then it was December of 2022, ChatGPT came out. And oh my God, the world caught on fire. Everybody was talking about AI, right? So instead of this
Yes.
little tiny sliver that was aware of it, now everybody was asking me questions about it. So it became very, very popular very fast. And the reason is that it started to really have an impact where people could ask it questions that they never thought they could have somebody. I think of this as the trusted mentor, right? The, GPT is this weird thing where it's always there. You can always ask it questions. It's always going to answer it to the best of its ability. It's not always right. It's not judgmental, right? It's not going to call you, hey, you're stupid, you should have known that. You can ask it the basic questions on arithmetic or algebra or anything that you want, and it's always going to be there for you. I became emotionally attached to these things because I had much less fear of going into this new environment where I didn't know something. It's really weird. I'm recognized as what's called a distinguished engineer, so I have all these great credentials. But I still had this thing called imposter syndrome, where I
Ah.
said, well, people think I'll know everything about anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I would go into a new project and there's something I didn't know anything about, and I would feel kind of dumb before. But now I have this secret weapon. I can always go ask Chat GPT, and maybe not look quite so dumb. So it's really been an emotional tool for me so that I can go in with confidence and I know how to ask the questions. There's a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
you got to know how to ask the questions, right? It's called prompt engineering and things. But it has changed the way I look at the world because I also know that even the the student in this inner city school who doesn't have a mentor, who doesn't have a background, who doesn't have a lot of friends, if they're curious and they go in and ask this, they're there to help them learn. And I know you saw the TED video that I did, and I referenced this
Yes.
called Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson. And if I could just recap that a little bit, because it's so
Of
important
course. Of
and things.
course.
So Diamond Age has a character in it, and she comes upon this kind of tablet device and hooked up to the tablet to this vast AI supercomputer. And it's programmed to nurture her and teach her and be her companion, and but do it in a way that it dynamically adapts to her. I think she's 5 years old when she finds it, and it first of all just tells her story about her stuffed animal and things like that, and then it slowly gets better and more sophisticated, and challenges her until she really is pushing the envelope of what she can learn, and then she becomes brilliant and all that other stuff. And that's kind of the thing that I've always held in my mind, well, a science fiction author could imagine it, but it was a genre of science fiction called cyberpunk, and cyberpunk has a fruity roads, no time travel, no warp drive, all the things that are not possible in physics you can't really put in your future state. But everything in this book was real. Everything could happen.
Mm.
And it was all dependent on having enough computing power and enough imagination on how to use it. And that was really the magic thing. So ever since I read that book, 1985, I've always been asking myself, how could I create such a book? And that's really been kind of the North Star principle for me of how I can go forward and build a completely adaptable learning machine. And GPT and ChatGPT has been the closest thing I've found to that so far.
So yeah, you make me think about how you said the sort of exponential computing power, the exponential growth of computing power over time, and being able to some extent predict. Look, oh, at this point in the future, we'll be able to kind of align these aspects, and we'll have enough data to play with, and we'll be able to see if this actually works. So let's talk about education. You've written in your blog about limitations of direct instruction in our education system. And you've talked about how AI can help revolutionize education in our country. And that really is music to my ears because I'm very interested in how, as a systems thinker, how can we address the systemic challenges that are in American education? So, how do you see AI playing into this solution?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for bringing that up and for you to mention systems thinking, because I think that people have had a background in systems thinking, bring to the table a vocabulary to really talk about problems in an important way. Um, I think of this as many problems in our society can be solved if we think about systems and how they work. I think that every person on this planet is born with an innate potential to be a problem solver, to contribute. And I grew up in southern India. My parents worked for the World Health Organization. So I got exposure to a lot of different cultures very early on. And I always try to take the global world perspective, not just a white privileged male growing up in the Midwest in a very, very fortunate setting. But I try to think about all this potential out there. And every time there's a person born, I think that there are systems in place that prevent those individuals from reaching their potential. And that could be poverty, that can be lack of education, that can be war and political strife, that can be things that don't give them access to opportunities. I think as when my kids were growing up, I always thought curiosity was kind of a superpower that they had, that they could ask me any question. And I remember one of my daughters, we were on a road trip for about 2 hours. And in that whole road trip, she just kept asking questions. She never was tired of asking questions. And I think that's just a gift that children had, but they often don't have an adult that's patient and willing to do that. Our cell phones are so addictive now, right? Everybody's on their,
Yeah.
they're not listening to their kids. They're not listening for that superpower of curiosity and feeding it and letting them know that yes, you have the potential to make the world better, but you have to understand how these systems work and how they interact. So I'm not sure if I answered your question together. I get so excited to talk
Well,
about another systems thinker, but
yeah. No, no. I feel like we're on that road trip. We're at like hour one and we have an hour to go, right? Because I think I agree that systemically there are these things and what I see a lot of times is people are trying to solve systemic problems with these little band-aids, these little small solutions. And of course they get frustrated because you might solve a problem temporarily or you might solve a problem in a small area, but then the minute you release the pressure that you were putting on the situation starts to bleed out again, right? So I was curious. You have solutions that are AI specific that
yeah,
you directly apply to this. So that's
right.
what I was.
Yeah, yeah, and
Hmm.
you specifically mentioned, now go back to your question about instruction, right? The
Yes.
problem of instructional things. So I always try to go back and imagine Socrates uh, standing up in front of his students and giving a lecture, right? 2,500 years ago, right? And that process of a teacher standing in front of a classroom has not changed for a long, long time, 2,000 years. Um, and now it's potential, we have a potential to change. And why? It's the idea of, instead of, you look at a classroom, and I work with teachers all the time. They're responsible for teaching curriculum. They look at their class, they know all their students, they know the bright ones, and they know the kids who need a little more time and a little more focus. And they have to design a curriculum. And unfortunately, you can't design a curriculum just for the most advanced students. You have to design it so that 90% of your kids are not going to get lost, right? So you take this bell curve of learning rates, and there's nobody stupid, right? I don't think their kids are stupid. I think they come with different languages. Maybe English isn't their first language, and they need a
Hmm.
little more time to learn. Well, what if we had an adaptive curriculum so that the teacher could say, here's our topic for today, and you have 30 kids, and every kid has a different variation. And sometimes their curiosity is going to take them in a different direction. Now, they're all going to have to learn some of the basics so they can go on to the next lesson. But generative AI has this ability to hyper personalize, to, instead of one lesson for 60 students, every student could have how they did on the quiz in the last couple of weeks feed into an algorithm that could design a lesson plan. And that lesson plan could include, just like in the Diamond Age, the primer, animations, graphics, stories in their language, potentially, using the metaphors that they understand to help them understand new concepts. And that's really the thing, that when you think about our systems, you think of 2,000 years of one lecture targeted at the slowest group of students learning rate. Um, we have the ability to change that all, and I think that's going to be liberating. Now, there is a danger here, right? I always tell, technology doesn't have ethics on its own. People have to apply ethics. Technology is like fire, right? It can warm
Hmm.
and it can burn your house down. It's neutral. It doesn't care. AI is like that. It's a technology. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad. We already have seen bad actors using AI to do bad things, in poor facial recognition, giving people
Yeah.
bad experiences, and not treating people fairly, with bias. We see language bias in a lot of our AI, and I have blogs that talk about how to detect that bias, how to correct for that bias, all those things. But there is a silver lining with all this positive negative, and that's the chance for these AI to be the primer for our kids, to be that always there, always on thing that enriches your curiosity, to help you answer questions about the world that are important to you, and do it in a way that is hopefully fair without too much bias.
Okay. Okay. Hold on, Dan. Hold on. Okay. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the vision, right?
Yeah.
The personalized to the specifics for each kid
Mhm.
lesson plan that gets them the basic knowledge and allows them to go where they need to go inside that content area, right? That the teacher is bound to teach them. How do we address the time bound nature of the teacher's presence in the classroom with the students? Or are you envisioning that there is no time clock on it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are all these kids in fifth grade, or are how is this? Is this fitting inside of an existing system, or do we have to just blow the system up and then start from here?
You're asking all the right questions, man.
I need to know, Dan. I need to understand this.
Uh, and I'll tell you, I don't have all the answers, but I'll tell you what, when we go back to systems thinking, there are some principles that we try to bring forward here. And part of that is system thinking says that we're going to look for uh, patterns that reinforce them, right? Positive feedback. We're also going to look for systems where we have negative reinforcement. We're going to try to look at how these systems all interact. And we're going to look for the smallest possible knobs located in the right places that when we tweak these knobs, we get leverage, right? What's the smallest change we can make to get the best positive outcomes of our systems, right? How do we get away from the unintended consequences towards really helping these systems that interact achieve the goals? And that is
Okay.
democracy and education. Um, so I don't know exactly how the synchronization of classrooms is going to work, but I will tell you
Mhm.
that personally, I know that kids, when we give them robotics projects and they work together, they have a great time. They learn from each other. They Different kids have different skills. They watch each other. They empathize with. That's so important, right? So we
Yeah.
can't just
Oh,
have
yeah.
kids locked in a room with a computer, right? That's not going to happen. Well, I don't think that's the best way to do it. I want kids to be working on things that help them use their curiosity superpower to build things. I believe in that. We call that project-based learning. That has a technical name. I think the school of the future is still going to have kids coming into the school. It's still going to have interactions, but are teachers going to be standing up and lecturing and giving the same quiz to everybody and forcing them to memorize facts? I hope not. I hope that we have a better environment. I hope that we teach kids not just about math and physics and algebra and things, but how to work together in groups to solve the problems that are most important for our society.
No, that's great because as you're describing how this can work, integrating it into the existing system, my next thought becomes, okay, how does that affect young people socially, right? Is it isolating that even though we're in the same room, if we all have different levels, we're going to know as we are social animals, we're going to recognize, oh, so and so is more advanced, they have a different level or they have better questions, if you will. But I like what you're saying about we're all working together and we're bringing our strengths to the project based learning model. So it's not a thing where we're all individual because you know how it is. Sometimes when technology is introduced to classrooms, you can end up with a classroom full of kids, each on a tablet or a Chromebook, and they might as well be at home somewhere because they're not really interacting with each other. So I'm envisioning what you're saying, where young people are working together to solve problems and technology is a tool and the educator is now present. Sort of I see them moving throughout the space, not so much, okay, I'm going to give you a lecture, everybody be quiet and listen, which we know is it needs to be left in the past. We've got to move past that model. So that's fantastic. So okay, what about micro sims? I want to know, you're all about micro sims, right? Can you tell me what that is? Because I don't know what a micro sim is. I want to know.
Yes, so the term microsim was coined last year by a very talented woman named Valerie Lockhart. Valerie works for an organization called Code Savvy that I've been volunteering for about 10 years. And uh, we had been talking quite a bit about generative AI, and I've been using generative AI and teaching generative AI classes for almost 4 years. If you go back and look at my blog, it was 2020 that I first started to teach teachers how to create lesson plans with good old GPT-3, right? Long time ago. Um, but what Val did was she realized that there was this one library that was perfect for doing creative work and animation. And that's called the P5.js library, which NYU, New York University, has been a fantastic supporter of. It's been around for since about 2000, over 20 years. So it's a very, very established language. And because people have been using processing, it's called processing as language. P5 is the version 5 that is running in all the browsers now. Because there's been so much material out there, these generative AI programs that learn from surfing the web found so many examples of programs. And because there was so much sample code out there, you could ask it a very short question, ChatGPT, and it will generate a simulation for you. And one of my favorite things to do is go into ChatGPT, and you have to know the right words. You have to say, create a p5.js sketch. And so those words are really important because it knows which library, which version, and everything. You can say, generate a p5.js sketch of a bouncing ball.
Mm-hmm.
Click enter and it generates some code. You copy it into the what's called the editor and hit play, and it generates this bouncing ball. It's so cool.
Okay. So I could do that of, like of a cat or something like that.
Yep.
Or is a cat a little bit too complicated?
Uh,
Maybe like a
it I haven't tried that. It might know how to find an image of a cat and make it bounce around the screen.
okay.
So you might have to say create a P5JH sketch that uses an image of a cat bouncing around the screen. That might.
Ah. But no, to your point, you have to know the language. That's what I struggled with when I first encountered Chat GPT. I was like, oh, I have to ask it questions a certain way to get what I want.
Mhm.
And that um I think a lot of people who are just starting to learn about Chat GPT think of it as a like, oh, people students use it to write their papers for them or something like that. And it's like, well, once you've used it, you can spot the language a mile away. So I think I'm excited to put people's concerns to bed about like you can pretty much detect it with the eye, and I believe there are ways to detect it that are like tech driven, right? There are ways that you can like catch the percentage of certain words that are used or language patterns. Am I making that up? I feel
Uh,
like I saw that somewhere.
it is a very controversial topic, by the way. Can AI detect AI? And and the answer is sometimes, but
Okay.
certainly not with any certainty.
Oh, so you still need a person to kind of take
Well,
a
here's the
guess.
thing is if you're clever at writing your questions, you can say, write an essay on the Gettysburg Address in the style of a seventh grader, including spelling errors and typos.
Oh no.
And it will
Uh-oh.
do that.
And then there you go. No Chat GPT
And
in there at
nobody
all.
nobody can detect that, right?
Ooh.
So there's
Oh well. Sorry,
there's
teachers.
any yeah, sorry teachers. This we're joking around it, but this is a huge issue, right? I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you a little story. We have a lot of teachers who base their curriculum on giving writing assignments to students that they grade.
Yeah.
That all is going to have to change unless you have what's called
Yeah.
a proctored environment, right? Very carefully controlled where you give students a piece of paper in a room and they actually have to write by hand, which is kind of an artificial thing. The bottom line is that because students can use generative AI to do so many things now, and maybe they should be encouraged to do some things. We had some teachers that were about to revolt. We had several suburban schools, and a lot of the teachers was very worried, and they were going to write a request to all the the supervisors, the school districts, to ban all use of generative AI in all classrooms, right?
Oh
And
wow.
so Valerie was called in, and we talked a little bit about it, and she said, "Well, I'm just going to go and teach them a class on what it is." So she has a standard class she does for these teachers, and they go out and talk about what are the most tedious things in your classroom. What are the things you'd like to automate? What are the hardest things? And one of the things is, say you wanted to create a lesson plan, a detailed lesson plan on how to learn trigonometry or sine waves for these students, and they type it in, and the teachers do, and they see the lesson plan come out. And then they say, here's some background about this student. They were doing very well, but their grades have dropped. Let's compose a letter to their parents, letting them know that their grades are slipping. So you just put the bullets in and it generates the letter for you. And you can still proofread it and everything like that. She went through all the boring, tedious, painful parts of the teacher's day. And you know what? They never complained about GPT again because
Wow.
because
She redirected their attention.
well, when we don't understand something, it is natural for us to have fear, to have uncertainty, and have doubt about whether it's going to make our world better. but by understanding technology, how to control fire, right? How not to get burned by fire, but to control it, to
Mm-hmm.
keep your house warm and all this other stuff. Then you understand that technology is not a negative inherently, it's a mix. And then you learn how to control it. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to do as a society is reach out to our teachers, our educators, our volunteers, our mentors, our classroom assistants, everybody, the teaching assistants in college and stuff, and teach them how to use a generative AI to help them build better experiences for their students without doing a black and white ban on technology. So
So, okay, is there a micro sim? Is the micro sim the lesson plan that you can create? How does that fit in?
that's a good question. So technically, a microsim is kind of a small standalone program that runs in your web browser that you can generate kind of on demand for a classroom or a specific student who's having problems with a specific problem. And then you run that microsim in front of the classroom, usually at a smart board or something in the front. And then you can send the students the link. And if they have a Chromebook, they can click on that link and then they can run the simulation. And all of these simulations have these little controls on the bottom. So you don't just say, here's an animation, watch it. You say, here's a picture of a sine wave, and I want you to move this slider and change the amplitude or the frequency or the phase. And by having these three little sliders, the kids get an intuitive feeling for what it's got to be interactive. It's got to be participate. It has to be hands-on, and they have to participate in that simulation or animation.
Okay, so the simulation is replacing my math teacher back in high school drawing that curve on the board, and we're all staring at the same drawing, and whether you get it or not, you just, figure it out or pretend you figured it out. Now I have a customized simulation right in front of me that I'm manipulating based on the teacher's instruction and prompt to design it
Yep.
and based on my prior performance in the class. Do I have it? Did I
You
get
got
it?
it. You got it. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's give you another example. Do you remember in
Okay.
economics class where they had this
See,
thing
that's
called,
where I got to stop you right there. I never took an economics class, so you're just gonna have to.
all
But I'm
right,
gonna go with you.
I'll do a
I was an
little
art
story here.
student, Dan.
You know when you go to the store and somebody has increased the prices a lot, and you say, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to buy that anymore. That's
Okay.
called the law of supply and demand.
Yes.
Supply and
Yes.
demand, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they have these curves on in economics called supply and demand. And when I first saw them, I just didn't get them. And then I kindly studied it a while, and I've kind of figured it out. When my daughter was taking economics, she didn't understand it. This was about 10 years ago, actually 15 now to think about it. And so I created a little animation for her where she could change the price, and as she raised the price, how many things she sold would go down. If she lowered the price, it would go up.
Okay.
And what's really cool is now you can say, hey, ChatGPT, create a p5.js sketch for me that illustrates the law of supply and demand. Please let the students change the price and show them how the demand curve changes. And it
Okay.
does it. It's so
Yes.
cool. It's so cool.
Yes. And no, go ahead. I was gonna.
Uh, there's an entire ecosystem out there of companies that have been trying to sell these little animation things for classrooms, right? And you can buy a curriculum. I have a friend who's a teacher, and they buy a curriculum for their ninth grade geometry class, and they spend about $1,400 per classroom, each classroom, and they get to use it for 14 weeks. So that means the school is paying a company there's about 300 animations that they use for, circles and arcs and tangents and shapes and all the things you learn in a geometry class, right? $1,400. Well, a lot of schools don't have $1,400 per center for that class. What if
No.
these were free, right? And what if we
Mm-hmm.
had enough of them that that you could find a little simulation and do it in contextual, and you could see it and you say, well, that's just nice, but I want to change this little parameter. I want to make the As I change the slider, I want the size of the ball to change as it bounces around. Or any parameter you can give it one and say change this, and these programs are really good at making a small tweak on it. So even though it's a very large complex program, you can say modify it, and it will do that. So the weird thing about this is, you think of systems thinking, there's one thing I found out that teachers really get excited about when they want to create them, is that's after they've seen them, right? When they see a microsim, they say, I love that. Can I create this for my class? Can I do this? And they get excited. So we call that positive reinforcement, right? It says,
Mm-hmm.
see them, I want to create. When I create more. Other people see what I create and they create more.
Mm-hmm.
That thing means that we're going to have a eventually an exponential increasing number of these little simulations out there. It's interesting, if you study learning theory of a typical high school class, you'll realize that there's actually about 10,000 little concepts that students have to either know beforehand, prerequisites, or master doing that to go to the next level, about 10,000. And every little word is a concept. Every way that you draw things is kind of a concept. And the idea is that computers are so powerful that 10,000 concepts in creating animations for them, in a few years, that's going to be nothing, right? You're going to be able to just say, hey, create 10,000 animations for this curriculum, and it's going to be able to do that. But we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. And what's going to happen is, every year, teachers are going to see more of these little AI animation tools, and they're going to say, I want to create them. And the one hardest thing about this, by the way, is they create them and they often don't share them, right? They said, oh, yeah, I did that 6 months ago for my classroom. I forgot to tell anybody. Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh,
So how do you share this, right? We haven't figured that one out. We have little search engines. We have some websites you can go to. You can type in search, microsims for geometry, and you can find some things. But we're not getting to the stage where we have that critical mass yet. I think once we do, it's going to start to have things. By the way, once you have the little simulator, you can also ask ChatGPT to create a lesson plan customized for any student based on their grade level, based on you can say, here's the things they got right last week in the quiz, here's what they got wrong, and it'll create a custom lesson plan to use those microsims. So lesson plans, curriculum, and then that holistic systems thinking, we're trying to get those all to come together.
teachers are, if they're on board with it, they're able to perhaps locate some funding or partner up with other schools, teachers and their systems and things like that, and get these microsims from companies that exist. Can they create microsims on their own without programming support?
I would say yes, with one caveat. They need to have some curiosity and some patience. Curiosity and patience. When you first write your prompt, you may not give it enough context, and it won't quite know what you're asking for. And so it's going to generate, well, it's going to be something, but the layout's not right, and the buttons aren't right. They don't have the right labels on them and stuff. And you're going to say, that's not exactly right. You need to be patient. You need to go back and rewrite your prompt to be more specific. And then as you do that, you learn these little tricks about how to coach that AI to get exactly what you want. And there is a learning process to that. But we do, Valerie Lockhart does most of these workshops. She has other teachers that do them. And what she finds is, in a typical half day, teachers are pretty frustrated the first hour. It's not quite working. They can't quite get it to do. The second hour, they have some successes. They get some things working. By the third hour of the workshop, they're starting to rock. They're starting to get things to work. They can generate new ones faster. They're talking amongst themselves. Oh, did you try this trick? Did you try this trick? By the end of the class, they've got a half a dozen working microsims that they're going to take and use in their classroom the next week, right?
Oh,
So
that's fantastic.
you got to get through that learning curve. And my advice is, don't do it alone, right? If you do it alone, you're going to get frustrated. Get in a group, try it with other people, get in a group of other teachers that are going down the same thing. And sometimes a school has one teacher who will be the leader. We call it the thought leader, right? You got to have somebody who's going to lead that thought. We can build this. Here's the vision of the future. You got to have that visionary. And they don't have to be the best programmer, by the way. They just need to give the teachers the confidence that they can build these things. If we get a school with a thought leader, or a school district, sometimes even better, they can start to do seminars, they can start doing their professional education, and they can start to get those into their classrooms. So that's we're starting to see some of that. It's not happening in all schools, but we're starting to see some examples of that.
Okay, so what about visual artists? Can they use these kinds of technologies to create like an interactive artwork or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. And I got to tip my hats to NYU, New York University, because they have been the global leader in this field of running curriculum for artists. So if you go and look at just search for processing foundation, a lot of the leaders in that come from NYU. So what does NYU do? They have courses, technology for artists, and this one language processing is the core of that. And they start out with doing very simple artwork, graceful lines that move back and forth. And then they bring in different colors and they do all these other things. There's plenty of videos online to watch it. And so, what they're trying to reach out to artists who want to be creative, but they think they don't have the technical skills to be creative. And what they're showing them is that by mastering a few techniques, they can do this. And what's really accelerating the work of artists is do this. And what's absolutely crazy is you go in if you know how to do these searches where you know what to look for in P5, they have they have 3D animations. They have a lot of people then go into games. They're building these fun, creative games and stuff. They have to have some interactivity, how to use the mouse to change the pattern of these flowing waves in the screen. Oh man, there's just so many cool stuff. So once again, it's trying to unleash your imagination and doing it. So the answer is yes. Processing is specifically created to enable non artists without any computer training, any formal training to create these things.
I recently directed a musical, and in it there is a story. There's like a driving sort of part of the narrative where a character loses their brother to gun violence, right? And I had initially thought, okay, I'm going to find a local actor to hire and capture imagery of that actor and then give it to the production designer to work with to include in the overall concept, the visual concept, right? But then when I got almost to the point where I was about to cast people, I realized that I did not want to subject a black male actor to the idea of being killed for the sake of this narrative. And so I decided that I would use artificial intelligence to create imagery of a black male who
Really
looked close enough to yeah, like so
interesting.
I decided like from an equity standpoint,
Yeah,
from an
yeah,
empathy standpoint, right? And from thinking about how black actors are often sort of put in these positions of having to play these really tragic roles because of things that have happened in our world. I decided, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create a way to protect actors from this kind of experience.
yeah. Wow.
Excuse me, because yeah, because as dramatists, like the experience isn't real, but it sort of is because when you're doing the work, it feels real, and if you have to do it over and over, or if, so point being. I decided to use that as a tool for narrative purposes, but also to protect
Mhm,
actors from having to have this kind of negative experience, right?
mhm.
And so you just trying to get away from that layered trauma and unnecessary trauma for actors. So what I want to know is, and I know that that's not a micro sim,
No,
but
but,
it's a
but it's a great example. So can you tell me how it went? Did you use like one of the Dolly tools to generate images? How
yeah.
did you
I
learn how to
looked.
do that?
Well, I tried a few different tools, right? Because as you know, they generate differently. They give you all kinds of filters and styles and everything, and it's a bit overwhelming. But I
It
ended
is.
up, but yeah, but believe it or not, the one that's in Canva, I don't remember that particular one, but the AI image generator in Canva that you can use as a part of your design,
Okay.
that one got me the best image. And so I put in a prompt. I put in so many prompts over and over and over, right? And it's just what you said. You have to be patient and you have to kind of know what you're looking for. So sometimes I would put a prompt in, I would say, Teddy, 18-year-old Brooklyn African American boy, and it would give me one image. And sometimes I'd be like, Teddy in the city. I would do all these kinds of things, and I would just be dependent upon what the information was that AI was trained on, is like what it thinks I'm going for, and I would
Yeah.
just keep honing the language and until I found an image that looked the way I wanted it to look. And now, as we know, portraiture in AI is still tricky, right? Too many fingers, the
Yep.
eyes are kind of weird, the teeth, all that. So,
Yeah,
so
you
some of
learned
them
it.
I said, right? So I would be like not smiling because I knew if they were
Yeah.
smiling, the teeth would be crazy. So like I was figuring out how to get as close to a static image of a young teenage boy as I could. And I ended up with this really incredible, beautiful picture of a young black boy just sort of looking off into the distance. He had a collared shirt and a backpack on, and it was so sad. And when I tell you, I was sitting in the audience and the projection it would come up in the projection design, the picture would just be huge, right, on the stage, and you could hear people just just feeling for this not real person. And I felt like, see, okay, now I'm getting somewhere here because
Mhm.
that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how can we tell stories and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
authentic,
Yeah.
right, to things that are potentially very painful and very tragic, but without bringing harm to living artists. And that's something that I mean, this just happened. So I say all of that to say I think there's really we have just scratched the surface of what this kind of technology can do. And I'm really excited to think more about it. So I want to know from you, when you talk about the micro sims, is there a way that micro sims can support performing arts, arts education, arts integration with core concepts, anything around there that you've thought about or seen?
Yeah. Before I go there, I just want to talk about your experience generating images.
Okay.
And I think it's illustrative of a lot of things that are happening in our world. I use there's a version of ChatGPT called the Pro version, and it has something called DALL-E in it, and it's really really good. And I do a lot of presentations where I'm trying to get executives and decision makers to remember something. And what's the best way to get them to remember something? You have to realize that memory is tied to our emotional brain, right? There's a part of the brain called the amygdala. It has all the emotions, fear and laughter and fun and all that stuff. And it's tied to how we remember things. Storytelling is the most powerful weapon we have to help people remember the important things when we're trying to communicate. So I feel that I've become a better storyteller because I've been able to generate images that help me tell these stories. I do it over and over and over again. And I have a mixed emotion about it. Before I had these tools, my PowerPoint decks were boring, just bullet lists, right? And nobody would remember anything, right? But I didn't
Mhm.
have budget. I mean, I do presentations every week. I didn't have budgets to hire a professional artist, but I have a great respect for artists and what they do and
Mhm.
how they use their tools to create emotional experiences. I value those things. And I still think that if I had a budget where I wanted to do a really good image, I would hire artists. But I also know that I'm generating so much more imagery now because it's part of that storytelling process. And what it has taught me is that the other students that I'm mentoring, I'm trying to teach them how to tell good stories, right? Storytelling is so important in our communication, in our scientific communication, our trends. So I think it's the way you described your process of generating that image and the emotional impact it had on your audience. I think that's a good thing. And now we have to weigh that with the fact that maybe some artist could have had an opportunity there, uh, and we have to weigh the pros and cons of that, right?
Right. And that's the other side of it that I do think about when I've seen artists talk about, hey, AI was trained on my work and now you can go and create almost a complete replica of what I spent so much of my time and energy learning how to do, training, working on. You can just do it in 2 seconds. And so it does make me wonder. I mean, yeah, I guess that's a question we'll have to ponder, right? Because I don't know the answer to that. I feel like would I made a decision, right? I had the opportunity to create a real life image and have, someone, it would have been me or another member of the creative team, photograph a person. And that would have been the art that would have been included, right? In terms of the storytelling. But it gets very tricky because what I used to generate the image was existing images.
Yeah.
So it's so much to think about. And my understanding is that there's really not much, if any, regulation around AI at the federal level that gives us any sort of guidance on ethics and any sort of, I don't know, punishment if you do something wrong. Or is that true?
Um, well, it's such a vast topic here about both federal and state
Hmm.
have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of bills about ethical use of AI. I used to work for a healthcare company, and we were not allowed to release any predictive models about healthcare unless we had an outside review board review our algorithms for bias to make sure that we weren't predicting what drugs you should take for these diseases and conditions. We weren't negatively impacting African Americans or women or obese patients, that we did all this testing to make sure we were fair. And so we those are what are called architecture review boards, or responsible AI review boards. So they're every company now that that's trying to release models to the public has to do that. The FDA, we have all these AIs that look at X-rays. They have a whole set of processes. Spending companies are spending millions of dollars to try to use AI to predict whether this image has cancer in it, right? And they have to make sure it's fair and not biased and things. So there's a lot of things going on in this space.
So
What
wait, so there are bills. So then there are laws. There are bills that have been passed. There are, okay. So that,
Yes.
okay.
I can't, I'm not an expert on the federal legislation, but do
Hmm.
know state level, that's far more active. And I think there's a group that tracks the number of bills that have come up, and it's in the hundreds right now. Bill.
Okay.
Now,
Well,
whether
that's
they've all
good.
got passed, I don't know. And a lot of that has to do with, for example, face recognition. It's a very, very specific thing. Can you
Right.
use face recognition in law enforcement? Very specific legislation, yes or no. So a lot of states have passed that, and other states may have not gotten that through the legislative system. So there's all these. It's not AI in general. It's, can you use AI for this? There's uh, obviously, you might have heard the story of the attorney who generated notes for a brief, and the attorney didn't check the citations. Well, AI generated fake citations, so they could
Oh,
easily
wow.
tell that the attorney didn't have a human review it, and he was reprimanded and fined. right? So that's not
Uh-huh.
exactly a law, but
But there's some sort of yeah,
there
there's
are
some sort of checks and balances.
there are
Okay.
consequences. Yeah. Um, there's and I spend way too much time going through these Reddit forums about people who are discussing this, and there's immense scrutiny about these language models, and people try to trick them into generating bias and hateful speech and things like that. And then the companies try to detect those effectively hackers trying to break in their systems and refuse to generate bias, right? So there's this game always going on and on. And in general, uh, in language models, we have this concept called constitutional AI. It's kind of a weird thing. Just like we have a constitution of what we value in this country, these AIs are now trained. They have a roughly 100-page document that says, here are the values of our AI, and these how they map into values of our society. And whenever you generate text, make sure it's consistent with this constitution. Anthropic is a very good example of a company that spent a huge amount of time trying to write a constitution that they share with their stakeholders and making sure that the text they generate isn't. OpenAI, if you ask it, generate a picture of a CIO or a CEO or somebody with an MBA. In the past, they used to all be white males, right? And so they
When
had
you put the
to,
prompt in.
yeah, when you put in the prompt,
Uh
you didn't ask for a white male. You just say generate an image of a president, right?
mm-hmm.
And it would be white
Mm-hmm.
males, right? So they had to
Right.
go in and detect that. And so they equally distribute it into gender and race, so that it is a much more fairly representing of the population. That takes work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
reason is that if you go into Wikipedia and you look at the history of all the presidents of the United States, they're often associated with male gender, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what these models were trained on, right? So I have a
Mm-hmm.
whole blog on how to detect that. It's just shocking how bad it is, but it also shows you the immense amount of economic resources that companies are having to put in to try to prevent their models from exposing this bias to their stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a
That's
lot.
a lot. Okay, so we talked about ethics. I I talked about the theater work, and how I created an AI image. In terms of arts in the classroom, are there sims that you can create around teaching the arts, music, theater, visual art?
Yeah, I think there are, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that there's a huge number of them. They really work well when you're trying to teach something that's precise and easy to measure. Color theory, for example, right?
Okay.
You want to talk about you've got these lights on the stage and you want to mix different lights and do different shadows. So yeah, we can have lots of simulations for that. Sound, right? We could do all these simulations of sounds. How do you get feedback out of your sound system, and what are the filters you should use, and all this stuff? Yeah, tons of simulations for those things. So all the technical things about theater, yeah, I think they're going to do that. There are some AIs that are helping with choreography now, right?
Hmm.
So you could describe figures and the dance steps, and then it will generate images that go through that. There's absolutely amazing tools for generating music. You can say, I want smooth fusion jazz, and I want it to have roughly these words and emotions and things like that, and it'll generate incredible music scores for those things. And it's almost scary how the quality has just jumped so much in the last year or so. So yeah, there's all sorts of things like that, but I think of these as accelerators for allowing people that don't have lots of money to create an experience,
Mm-hmm.
where that means a small high school that doesn't have a big, huge theater budget they can use these things to create beautiful soundtracks and ambiance and generate background images and do all that other stuff without having to hire a whole orchestra, right? Uh,
Hmm.
but there's trade-offs, right? and
Right.
maybe when they go into production, they will have enough money to hire an orchestra, but when they're in the brainstorming phase, they'll use AI to generate some of this stuff.
Where is all this going? Where are we going? I mean, I'm still thinking about Moore's law. I'm like, okay, it's just gonna the power is gonna increase to what we're able to do. Right now, you're saying, oh, we can sort of only do these things. So I'm already thinking, okay, well, according to Moore's law, in about 10 years, we will be able to do it, right? And
Yeah,
and you've said, and you've made me feel a lot better because you said at least at the state level, there's lots of legislation either passed or waiting to be passed to govern how we use AI, right? From an ethical standpoint, recognizing that there's plenty of different types of AI, and you have to be very specific when you talk about, what you can and can't do.
right.
So where where are we going with this? Where do you see this moving towards in the next several years?
Well, I'll go back to the Diamond Age book by Neil Stevenson, right? And the young girls, an illustrated primer is what the thing is. Um, we're moving in that direction, right? And I have a phrase that I like to use. Never confuse a clear vision with a short distance. Never confuse a clear vision with a short distance. So vision
Okay.
is this is the direction we're going.
Uh-huh.
Distance is give me an exact day we're going to get there.
Right.
And I can't do
You
that.
can't do that.
I
Yep.
can't do
Yep.
that. My crystal ball of when we're going to
I was
get
gonna
there
say you can't put a prompt into Chat GPT and ask it.
predict when the average ninth grade student will have 10,000 sims for their geometry class. Yeah, that would be nice. I can't do it. But what I can say is that when you look at microsims today, I think there's a few thousand of them. There's not that many teachers creating them, and they're having difficulty sharing them. There's some search engines to kind of find them. We don't have a central catalog for microsims yet, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation might fund one of those. I'm got some contacts there. Khan Academy, another wonderful company out in the Bay Area, they're also starting to build more curriculum around this stuff. There are many forces that might start to build these collections of microsims. What I can say though is that I think it's pretty safe that if, say, we have 1,000 of them, high quality classroom microsims today,
Hmm.
I think by this fall we might have 2,000. I think
Okay.
by next spring we might have 4,000. I think by a year and a half we might have maybe 20,000, something like that. And the number of them is going to continue to grow. How many do we need to allow a student who's curious to go to their school's website and say, I want to learn about X, and they would give them what's called a learning path. And these learning paths are a journey from where you are to where you want to go. And the question is, how many of the small steps will they fill in for you? And this is down to say I wanted to learn how to write a chatbot, right? I want to write something like ChatGPT for my school, right? Well, what are the things you need to learn? You need to learn some programming. You need to learn about how to write a user interface, how to take the text, how to search your school's documents, find out what classes are in session, what teachers are teaching things. You could build all these pieces if you had the right background, and it has to fill in maybe 1,000 concepts for you to learn one step at a time without a big gap between them, right? And once you do that, we are going to have the ability to have a continuous curriculum for students that have the curiosity that want to learn those things. And we still want students to come into the classroom. We still want them to work in groups. We still want them to learn all the social skills that are necessary in a society. But I think that in less than 10 years, if a student is in a rural area and they're not exposed to this technology, they'll still have the opportunity to do this. So that's that I can tell you that's where we're going. What's interesting though is how customized it's going to be to their context. And we have a lot of issues about schools and their records. When I customize a lesson plan, I want to know how well the student did in the past. Well, who has access to that? Who can control that? Who can see that? There's a lot of security, policy issues, private information issues, and there's no magic silver bullet that's going to solve all of those problems. We have to make small incremental steps to control that information so that the right people can have access to create these environments. Just like in healthcare, right? We have so many privacy issues. I know that the people that broke into the health systems exposed hundreds of millions of clinical records out to the Russians just recently. Those are all bad things that are happening in our society. And we have to put controls in place to make sure that all the ransomware that's coming into these organizations doesn't happen to our schools. So we have to be cautious. We have to know that there's going to be bad actors. We have to put in defensive systems to make sure that they don't have access to our schools' records, and that we make sure that we're trying to build things that help the most students get the most out of their experiences.
That sounds really exciting. Where can listeners of this podcast go to learn more about micro sims and just any of what we've been talking about?
Um, well, the easiest way is just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Dan
Perfect.
Dan McCreary. You just go to there and connect with me, and I have a curriculum that I work with Code Savvy is the group that I volunteer with the most. I work with other organizations. The Raspberry Pi Foundation is a really good resource. They have a lot. They're building a whole curriculum based around knowledge graphs, my specialty, so that you can start to learn how they structure a lot of their curriculum. I think they're really leading the way. Um, I love code.org. I love you can you can just type in girls who code for some. There's great resources for black girls that code. There are resources where you can say, find me local coding clubs. You can go to Google and say, find a local coding club in my area. Khan Academy, another good spot. So there's lots of resources. And the one thing I really want to reach out to is NYU. Please go look at processing for NYU. And if you have any extra friends that are benevolent donators, donate some money to the wonderful people at NYU for their program to support the arts. Those are really important. Then the biggest thing is just to be open for things that are happening. Try to connect with other people on LinkedIn that are interested in using AI in education and the arts. Connect with you, obviously, because you're a great source. You have a lot of followers. You are definitely an influence.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank
so
you.
that's some ideas there.
I love that. Okay, so what about you personally, Dan? What are you excited about that you're working on? You have some projects
Yeah, so
happening?
I work at my day job. I work for a company called Tiger Graph. Tiger Graph is a company that builds what are called knowledge graphs. We strive to take and build models of the world, just like the human brain has a model of the world inside of our brain. We build models of the world for big companies that are models of their customers, about their products, about those things. And then we try to use AI to allow people to ask questions about their models of the world to do that. So I'm really focused right now in the short term on helping non-technical people in big companies get the most out of their information systems. Now, to be honest, what I'd like to do is bring that super high-end scale to literally billions and billions of what are called vertices to education. Someday, I would love to build what's called a learning management system that uses AI and knowledge graphs. So that's the holy grail for me, is to build that system that was kind of identified in Neil Stephenson's book. Maybe not with all the beautiful animations that are in the book, but more of the practical. I want to help kids learn, and I want to recommend classes, lesson plans, exercises, projects friends in their neighborhood that are also interested in similar things, mentors, teachers, coding clubs. All of those things should be in a chatbot recommendation as part of your school environment. And I think I can build that. I need about $100 million to do it, so I need some time and money, but hopefully there'll be some wealthy people that eventually donate money to build those things. And I think they should be accessible to anybody in the world. I don't want one company to own that, and I don't want schools to be beholden to one corporate giant that controls all access to that. I'd like to have it be open so that any school can download it and enrich their learning experience with powerful recommendations that are use the context of the student's background to help them learn and achieve their goals.
Okay, so I'm gonna predict for you that by 2029, you are going to be somewhere along your path on building this LMS that is AI savvy. It's got the AI in it and it's working and you can use it with education. Is that too soon? That's not too soon, right?
Uh,
Funding and everything. The funding is coming soon, and then you're gonna
You
get
know, it's
started.
funny.
That's my prediction.
I try to, I have this rule, never make a prediction more than 5 years because I've always been wrong.
But you might have been wrong, Dan, but I am telling you it's gonna happen because you just put it out into the universe. And I just said it's happening. I
Well,
promise. No,
I will, I
go ahead.
cannot build this alone. I have to have friends like you to spread the word
You
about
have
how
to.
we can
See?
build these things together. I think that society is not about lone cowboys doing stuff. I think it's about people working together, sharing ideas, having the most powerful ideas that are good for our society, making them spread, making them positive, making people sure people know that it's not a utopia. It's hard work to understand the
Mhm.
trade-offs and to help us build the things that we can to help our students and our artists learn about the world. So it's a journey, but we got to do it together.
We have to, and we can do hard
Yeah,
things, right?
you can.
So we're gonna
All right,
make it
your
happen.
prediction is 2029. We'll see if that.
Yes, 2029. So I'm just saying. So you didn't predict it, so you don't have to worry about it being wrong. It was me. You can be like, oh, it was her. So, oh my gosh, Dan, this has been such a great conversation. And there's already 10 other things that I want to talk about. So, what we're going to have to do is we are going to need to, if you're agreeable to it, we're going to need to take some time and come back and talk some more because I'm going to have so many questions and I'm going to have so many ideas and want to keep talking. So, is that cool? Can we do that?
Absolutely. And I also want to open my network, Valerie Lockhart. She's wonderful. The people from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, I think you'd be amazed to interview some of them. They're really good leaders. So I hope that
Oh,
we can build a
yes.
shared network to build this vision together.
I love that. I'm
All right.
in.
Sounds great.
All
Thank you so
right.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. You take care now.
All right.
Keyboard is produced, written, and hosted by Temby Duncan. Theme music by Psycho Sid. Visit us on Instagram at keyboard_IG.